Thanks for tuning in to the HUSTLR podcast. And today I have two awesome guests, hustlers, on the show. Say hello, guys.
Hey, what's up?
Hey guys, thanks for having us on the show. Appreciate your time.
Right. So Jeff and Ben are two really awesome people that I'm super proud to have as guests on the show. Okay, and they currently run a super profitable blogging business at Dollarsprout.com, and it's a blog that teaches people how to make and save money. And they were formerly known as VTX Capital, and they also run BreakingThe1%.com, and it's a blog about blogging. So like it's super meta, right? So once again, I want to say thanks for being cool enough to come onto this podcast, guys. So why don't we start off with a simple introduction of yourselves? You know, what were your experiences before starting VTX Capital, and what has changed since then?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm Jeff. I basically, my background is I used to work in finance for a financial advisor out of college. And the way that our business kind of got started was like a lot of other entrepreneurs. I, didn't like the idea of working for somebody else. And, after 2 or 3 years of working at my job, I decided I was going to try to do an online business. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, like how I started was, hated where I was at and, wanted to make a change. So that was, I think 2015 is when we started VTX, which then morphed into Dollarsprout.
Just to give you a quick intro on myself, my name is Ben. I'm the co-founder of Dollarsprout along with Jeff, and, kind of along the same, reason for getting started. I actually have no background in finance. I was a registered nurse for about 5 years. I started BTX along with Jeff as kind of like a side hustle, as a way to make some extra money on the side. And a lot of it was kind of just, something to fill time and something I kind of enjoyed doing. I liked marketing and business. I had tried other like entrepreneurial ventures when I was a kid. I had my own little eBay business for several years back when eBay first took off. I actually got into computer hosting or, hosting for websites and game servers and stuff like that. So I did that for several years. And then, during my college years, Jeff and I had always discussed starting a business, but we didn't necessarily have a specialized skill set that would lend itself to running a business. I was in biology, he was in biochemistry, and neither one of those degrees, kind of lends itself to launching and scaling an online business. But yeah, we didn't really know what we wanted to do at first, but I think that after several years in the investment firm, Jeff kind of got an idea of where we wanted to take things, and that's where we got started.
Right. So how did VTX Capital initially started off, and what has changed since then? Because, I follow your story, but I don't know about our listeners. So, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, how you guys met each other. Have you guys been buddies for quite some time?
Yeah, so Ben and I met in college. We both went to Virginia Tech together, and we actually were on the Virginia Tech Rescue Squad, which is just a bunch of EMTs, covering 911 calls on campus. And we both were studying, like you said, biology and biochemistry in school. And I kind of always had an interest in finance, but it was sort of always a side thing. And then eventually, when I graduated college, I, didn't really like the degree field I was in, so I wanted to get in finance. So I eventually got the job, like I said, at a financial advising firm. And basically, when we decided to start VTX, the whole idea behind it initially, this is not what we do now, but initially it was, Ben and I wanted to, trade stocks on our own and write about our trades and, share with readers, here's what we're doing today. Here's I'm going to buy a position in this stock and here's why. And then the idea was to have people eventually pay us for that. And, that ended up being a complete flop when we first started. That's not what we do at all now. But yeah, when we started, it was designed to be like a membership type of website, like a subscription membership site. And slowly it has morphed into now where all of our content is free and we are monetized with primarily through affiliate marketing. So that's our business model has totally changed since we started. That's the biggest thing for us is, just be willing to pivot and, find something that works. And then once you do, get really good at that thing that works.
Right. What kind of struggles that you guys had to go through, I mean, you guys, because I'm a startup founder myself, in the beginning, I had to live on ramen, on instant noodles, lack of sleep, lack of exercise and all that. So can you share some of your struggles that you guys have went through, when just starting out BTX Capital, now known as Dollarsprout?
Yeah, definitely. So I made the mistake of leaving my job to start entrepreneurship full-time before the business was making any money at all. So I went from, a comfortable salary, nothing great, but enough to live off of, to then where I had zero income coming in. So, that obviously involved a lot of sacrifices and stress for that first couple of years. So for instance, I didn't have health insurance for the first year of being an entrepreneur, which is so bad. Like, don't do that. Anyone, please, listening. I've never been more sick than I was that first year, probably because I was just stressed and just getting sick all the time and I couldn't go to a doctor. But yeah, there were definitely, like, the financial sacrifice was huge. But at the same time, I knew that going into it, so it wasn't too bad. And, we're even still now after, a few years later, we have a little bit more success. For the most part, Ben and I still live like college students. We still, eat, not ramen anymore, but maybe like slightly better food. We had McDonald's for breakfast this morning, so it's not like anything is like crazy.
So what about you, Ben? What kind of story?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of the challenge was kind of just time management oriented. Like Jeff had mentioned, he had made the jump from his full-time job to entrepreneurship like instantaneously. He had saved up some income and then made the jump, which, back when we were not income generating. And so that made it really stressful for him. But for me, I stayed at my job as a registered nurse for the better part of like 2 years, putting in time on the side, I guess. It was one of those things where I was putting in full-time hours at the hospital that I was working at as a nurse, but then I was also probably putting in full-time hours, if not more, working on our side hustle, so to speak, or our online business that we had started. And I think for me, just that the quality of life that kind of generates is, it probably was only made possible by the fact that Jeff and I, again, we didn't have any like full-time commitments either to like a spouse or to anything like that. I think that being like single young bachelors allowed us to spend an inordinate amount of time on like kind of growing and scaling our business. I think that a lot of the success that we've probably achieved can be credited back to just the time that we've put in. I think that, we don't necessarily possess like industry experience that we've, spent 20 years acquiring. We don't necessarily have skills that a lot of other people do have or don't have, a lot of it just comes back to time, and that time was made possible by just having a wide open schedule. So for me, like, time management, it was one of those things where I worked at the hospital 4 hours a week, 40 hours a week. That was at times exhausting. I think some weeks I was working 60 plus hours, at the hospital, but I was still trying to find like those 40 hours a week to put towards our business. And so, that can be stressful and exhausting in its own right. But I think that, Jeff and I, we like and really love what we do. And so it doesn't, when you're working 60 hours a week at your job and then you're putting in an additional 40 hours a week on your business, you really need to enjoy what it is you're doing. And I think that the motivation and the reason that we were able to put in those super long hours is because we truly enjoyed what it is we were doing. I think that, it doesn't seem like work. It's fun. It's kind of like a puzzle that we couldn't, stop putting together during those other 40 hours a week of our downtime. So our downtime became our side hustle, and our side hustle eventually became our business. And so again, just the biggest pressure for me was just to find time for other things in life other than just working on the business. Like my girlfriend, getting to spend time with her. I know Jeff like has to carve out time to spend with his significant other too. So yeah, time management for sure.
Right.
I've got one other sacrifice to add that I forgot to say in my original blurb is, and I think you possibly know this part of the story, Jeremy, but when we first started, I had, money saved up to hopefully, hold us over until when the business was making money. But, as things went along, it ended up being that I ran through all of my life savings and had to go back to work. So that is usually, I think, when most people probably choose to throw in the towel and give up. And, looking back, there's really nothing that, there's no reason that I should have probably kept trying at the business, because by the time I had ran out of money, I hadn't made any progress in the business. We were still making not even enough to support one person, let alone two. So yeah, I actually went back and got a job as a low level, entry level aide at the hospital that Ben worked at. So I worked there. So we were actually for about a year, Ben and I both worked at the same hospital full time. Ben was making much more than me because he actually had, his nursing license. But yeah, that was just part of the overall sacrifice was, when things looked like they had completely failed, which they had kind of up till that point, I didn't really want to give up just yet. So I kept, working full time at the hospital while still, trying to get this business off the ground. So that's just another part of the sacrifice, I guess.
Right.
Right now, we're making a little bit above $200,000 a month in revenue. Profit-wise, we aim to keep a 50% profit margin. Right now, it's probably a little bit higher than that, probably around 60 to 65% profit margin. So yeah, we're between 2 and 250 a month is what we're doing currently.
So you started this business at 2015, but when did you leave? When you ran out of savings, when did you go back to the workforce? When was that?
Yeah, so I quit my job, was it August 2015 to my first time quitting work to go into full-time entrepreneurship. And I believe it was July 2016 when I had to go back and get a job. And at that point, our blog, I think that was our first month where we made $500 or $700 or something like that. So actually it was the best month ever for our blog, but unfortunately, even $500 a month doesn't even cover one of our rents. So I still had to go back and get a job. Yeah, the timeline was basically the first year we made roughly, $0 or 500 or whatever. And then the second year we ramped up a little bit, and I think it was around $80,000 or $90,000.
96.
Yeah. Between $80,000 and $90,000 the second year. Then the third year was around $400,000, and then we're hoping, it's May of 2019, so we're hoping for this year. We're hopefully on pace for somewhere between 2 and 3 million this year. Of course, nothing's ever guaranteed, so anything can happen, but that's hopefully what we're shooting for.
So how are you guys seeing the profits back in the days? Because since you guys, still live like college students, I'm pretty sure you guys have a lot of cash flow to spare, right?
Yeah, I could.
Yeah, no. I mean, so, like Jeff had mentioned earlier, he had said that we aim for a 50% profit margin. And I think what he means there is that it's kind of a self-set number. What we're currently doing is we're reinvesting around 50% of our income back into the business. So 50% comes out as profit, 50% is almost going straight back in, to further grow or scale the business. And part of that is by design. So we could potentially scale back our expenses to take a higher profit margin, but we want to keep growing the business at the pace that we have set forth. And so about 50% goes back into the business, and that is categorized in a number of ways. I think that right now, Jeff and I have put a large influence on content production. So one of the ways that we're scaling our business is simply by creating, more, great content. I think that a good portion, I'd say maybe about 50% of the money that we reinvest back into the business is spent directly on content production. So hiring freelance writers or in-house, editors or writers to produce that content, to look over it, and then to publish it. And so like about 50% of our overall expense goes into content creation, I'd say. And then from there, you could further break it down and say about 30% of our expenses goes directly back into marketing that content. So 80% of all of our expenses are directly involved in content creation and then content marketing. We spend a fair bit of money on paid channels to further promote our content. We spend of that 30% that we spend on content creation, content marketing, we pay virtual assistants to organically market our content. So we've got like an organic strategy where we try to push out our content on social media channels, and we spend time on organic search as well. And then there's a portion of our revenue that's devoted to scaling our organic visibility and organic presence as well. So, again, about 50% of our budget is spent on content creation, 30% on content promotion, and then the last 20% is just kind of like miscellaneous expenditures. We have like software licenses that that are a recurring expense, and tools, SEO tools, that kind of thing. So a fair bit of about almost exactly 50% of all of our revenue goes immediately back into the business. We kind of have like a zero-based budgeting system in that regard. We take out profits and then we put 50% right back in. So
yeah, I think one thing that has really helped us kind of guide our spending in the business is we try to focus our spending as much towards building assets for the business rather than putting money into fuel a machine. So it's not necessarily like we have a great sales funnel for a product, and if we're not spending $100 on Facebook ads to make 120 or something like that. It's like I would rather spend $100 to create, or more than $100 to create a good piece of content that will then we own that for the next forever, for 5-10 years down the road, and it's going to continue to get eyes on our website and get in readers' hands. So the way that we've really tried to focus is on like building as many like business assets as possible with our income for the most part.
So when you say assets, does that mean it's content, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So we view all of our pieces of content as a permanent asset for the most part. So, none of or very little of our content on our website now is like based off of like current events or news or anything like that. So all of our content, if we publish an article today on like, let's say like budgeting or something, the act of budgeting is not going to change, in 5 years. So like, that piece of content that we built will still be able to help people in 5 years. So basically the way we look at it is, every little piece of content is like, a new piece of like real estate for like our little business of just pieces of content out there. So the more content we have, ideally, the more of it, gets read by people and consumed, and, hopefully grows our business as well.
Like a key strategy for you guys, yeah. So,
oh yeah, it's like all of it, yeah.
Right. So I'm very curious, how did you come up with the idea or this concept or of creating, because initially VTX Capital was created to provide stock trading tips and stuff like that. How did it pivot to this direction? Like what happened to make it that?
Yeah.
So, Jeff had mentioned like the first year in our business was a struggle, so to speak. I think that when we first got started, we kind of followed this very vague like not very set in stone business model, and not having like a clear goal or like clear objectives was like kind of a massive mistake from the get-go. We spent the better part of a year just kind of aimlessly writing about like the stock market and like picking stocks, and we didn't really have like an end game in mind. And I think that when you don't have a goal or don't have like a super objective, things that you want to achieve, you literally chase your tail for a year. And we didn't really, make that realization until we got more serious about understanding what exactly our audience was actually interested in. So you come into this, you come to this like kind of crossroads where you begin to realize that what you want isn't always what your audience wants. And so that was like kind of the question that we finally began to kind of wrap our heads around was, what does our audience want? What are they actually engaging with? What are they interacting with? And we had spent a good, like I said, about 12 months growing our audience on our social media channels, my very small email list. And what we began to realize is that people were engaging, with more of our we had just kind of experimented with personal finance, more generic personal finance content versus, like specific stock trading. I think when you're in that arena, you're competing with other very reputable, very high authority sources, and it's hard to kind of gain readership, kind of gain market share from those big companies. And what we began to realize is that our audience was engaging with our personal finance content. They wanted to learn more about ways, extra ways to make money, to what's in the newest and latest and greatest side hustle out there. What are some good budgeting tips? And we began to realize that our audience was engaging with that content on platforms like Pinterest and on Facebook. And that's when we began to kind of pivot our content strategy. It was the first time in 12 months where we had actually made any meaningful changes, to our content strategy. And that is kind of what started to shape our journey from almost like a stock market, based commentary to more of a, people just like to learn about personal finance, be it, finding ways to make more money and get out of debt, or ways to save money, which will then help them get out of debt. And then what are the next steps from there, like how to start investing, and that sort of thing. And so we made this like kind of gradual journey from specific stock, picking and stock, commentary to, here are our personal finance topics that are important to millions of Americans, not just like 25,000 high acuity traders. Here's something that's relevant to 25 million Americans, 100 million Americans, 300 million Americans, because that's our audience. And started to cater our content strategy to that. So that's how we kind of started this process of rebranding, both from a content standpoint, but also like our actual brand itself. We transitioned to something more brand friendly, where we went from BTX to Dollarsprout, because we began to realize that our identity was in personal finance and not necessarily the stock market. So that's kind of how we made that transition.
Right. Cool. So now you guys are also running BTOP, Breaking the 1%. How do you guys, segregate your time between these two blogs?
All right. Yeah. So another tough one. I think that, time management has been a weakness of ours to some extent. And it really reached a tipping point when at one point in time we were running 3 blogs. We had VTX, BTOP, and then Dollarsprout was actually its own entity to start for a little while. We had 3 separate blogs. We were in way over our head. We were just chasing our tails, trying to create content, epic content for 3 different sites. And having your focus in 3 different areas, unless you're like an elite content producer, it's just better to stick to 1 and maybe 2. And I'm speaking from like hindsight is 2020, point of view now. But eventually we began to realize that it was like technologically, possible to kind of merge things together. And so that's when eventually we decided enough was enough. We need to at least get our focus down to 2 sites. So we redirected all of our URLs from VTX to dollarsprout.com. So we kind of shifted that content and moved it over to Dollarsprout. So it was on that server and that URL. And so then we got it down to Dollarsprout and BTOP. But BTOP actually came into the picture before Dollarsprout. I think that Jeff and I wanted an avenue to speak about our learning experiences. So, much like we're doing on this podcast right now, we wanted an outlet to teach people what we had learned. It was just like a creative way for us to talk about blogging and online business without doing it on a stock market commentary blog or website. So we had VTX. BTOP was kind of born out of that desire to kind of again have that creative outlet to network and meet people, but not have blogging content on VTX. It just didn't make sense to leave it there. We had dabbled in it. We tried a couple blogging related articles, but that might be the smartest decision we did make in this entire first 18 months, was that we made BTOP a separate entity, made it more like an online business entrepreneurship blogging focus. And kind of separated the two. But again, we kind of keep running into this battle of balancing time between the two sites. And I think that for the longest time, we tried to do 50-50. We tried to have VTX be this, personal finance entity and BTOP be this blogging entity. And we, when you're putting 50% into one site and 50% into another site, you're not putting 100% into one site. And I think that was something that we struggled with because we weren't efficient and epic content curators. I think that, there's nothing necessarily wrong with having two businesses or two separate focuses. You just probably stick to one while you master that one, and then you can take what you've applied to maybe scale out into a second venture. And that's a mistake that we made early on, is that we probably should have put 100% into a single business until we had really, learned what we were doing or kind of figure out what we were doing, and then shifted. So time has kind of changed. I think our time allocation. I think that Jeff and I still really enjoy maintaining a presence with BTOP. I think that if we were to step back and look at it right now, we probably spend about 20% of our time, and that might even be generous on breaking the 1%, because it's still our personal brand. I think that with Dollarsprout and VTX, that's always been kind of like more of a corporate brand. We don't necessarily attach our personal identities to those brands. We do have, our personal author profiles, and we do, it's not like we're anonymous in any way. But BTOP was like our networking kind of base of operations. We represent our personal brands. Our faces are plastered right there on the homepage. We're more open to sharing intimate details about our lives on BTOP because we're there to network. We're there to teach other bloggers. We're there to inspire and to help other people, scale and grow their online business. So yeah, that's not necessarily an income generating operation for us. We do probably generate low 5 figures from that website every month, but that is more of a passive element to the work that we put in a year ago. So we're still generating low 5 figures, but that's mostly because of work that we put in over a year ago. Most of our focus now is on Dollarsprout. We're still very present in our BTOP group because it's almost like the side hustle to our side hustle now. We just enjoy spending time, meeting people, and kind of teaching them the elements of growing this business. So yeah, 80-20 at best, and then most of our time is definitely spent on Dollarsprout now.
Yeah, I would say lately I'm more on the 95-5 end of the spectrum, but I'm actually trying to get better about that. I have a hard time balancing the two, especially I've been really into Dollarsprout stuff lately, and it's been harder to put energy and focus on BTOP, but it's a work in progress.
So I'm super glad that you guys still put in that 5%, because that's where I discovered you guys. That's where I discovered your story, and it's super inspiring what you guys did, which inspired me to, pursue the blogging journey as well. So thank you so much for still maintaining that 5 to 20%, right?
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah. So guys, if you guys had to state 3 tips each, for the sake of our listeners, what kind of advice would you give out to them who are especially for those people who are just starting?
All right, 3 tips.
I'm going to do 3 tips between us. That's going to be tough.
So I would say my first tip would be to constantly audit yourself and look at what is working and what is not working. Because if I would have had that tip starting on day 1 when we started BTX Capital would have only existed for like 2 months instead of 18, because we would have figured out that wasn't working and we would have pivoted a lot sooner. I think that as entrepreneurs, we have this kind of glorified idea in our head of what we want our business to be, and then we just keep hammering away at it, not necessarily looking at like, is what we are doing working or not. And I think that, if you're able to take a step back and be like, hey, we've been doing the same thing over and over for 12 months, maybe this isn't a volume issue. Maybe we're just doing the wrong thing, or we suck at what we're doing and we need to change. That would be my number 1 tip. I'll let Ben do number 2, and then I'll think of number 3.
Yeah, we'll stagger here. So I think that I will give a tip that's kind of along the same lines of what Jeff is, suggesting, and saying that constantly reevaluate, constantly audit what you're doing. Then I say the caveat to that is that make sure that you give enough time to strategies, to kind of pan out. So say, for example, your goal is to use search engine optimization to drive traffic to your website. I think that people will install, software or plugins onto their websites to kind of accommodate that. So if you're a blogger, you're probably familiar with Yoast, and what, the Yoast SEO plugin is. And what a lot of times, we see happen with newer bloggers is that they'll implement these changes and then they won't give them enough time to kind of pan out. You have to commit to something, commit to that strategy, and then eventually audit it. But commit to something 100% and go all in on when you decide that something is right for your business, go all in on it, and then make sure that you have an objective time period for reevaluating. So I guess maybe to further expand on Jeff's point is that, audit yourself and audit what's working, but choose like objective time periods to create that, audit point. So if it's SEO, that objective time period might be 6 months to start seeing results, a year to start seeing results. Whereas say it's like a brand new social media marketing strategy, that might be something that you can reevaluate in 1 month time. And if a month goes by and you haven't, reevaluated, you're doing exactly what Jeff is alluding to, in that you should have pivoted a long time ago. So like when you adopt a new strategy, set an objective time period for reevaluating, and then pivot if you need to. So that would be my I guess, further expansion at this point. But yeah.
Me.
I got another one. Should I go now?
No, I think I've got one. This might not be in like my top 3 tips, but I think an important thing that I've learned is, don't necessarily listen to everybody that's in your space as to like what will lead to your success. So for instance, since, Ben and I are in Facebook groups a lot and we interact with a lot of other bloggers, there's so many bloggers out there that are making money with online courses and like swear that like online courses and email list growth and product sales is like, that's how you make it big in blogging. And for us, we don't really sell, at least on Dollarsprout, we don't sell anything. We do 100% affiliate marketing. That's all we do. And I think that, if you're willing to find, what works for you, and it doesn't necessarily look like what's working for everybody else, like don't be afraid to just like double and triple down on that thing that's working. So for us, it was affiliate marketing, and then we just kept, scaling that strategy. And, we still, try to collect emails and do the best we can there, but it's not our strength. We're not a product company or website. We don't sell anything. We don't have any plans for blog or for like personal finance courses or anything. I'm sure we could probably do well with that, but I don't really know much about email funnels and product creation and tripwires and upsells and all that stuff. That's a totally different ballgame than what we're doing. But if you were to only look at what your peers are doing on Facebook or other bloggers or wherever you hang out, if you start to see like, man, everyone's doing this one thing and like maybe that's what I need to do, like I would caution people to not necessarily listen to that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think another tip, and this is probably the least exciting tip, but it's probably the most realistic tip, is that anytime you embark on like a new venture, be it like a small side hustle or like an online business or even a brick and mortar business, I think that your ROI, at least in the beginning, is often like directly correlated to the time that you put in. So for people that aren't spending enough time in the trenches and like actively working to grow and scale their business, I think those are the people that are disappointed with their results. I think that nothing replaces the just the time commitment required to learning all of the skill sets that you will need to make it as an online business. Like Jeff was alluding to mastering affiliate marketing for us, but and being proficient in some of those other marketing aspects of like an overall comprehensive marketing strategy. So like, even though affiliate marketing is our strength, it doesn't necessarily mean that we haven't spent hours learning about paid media acquisition and course creation and email funnels and then that kind of marketing. I think that nothing replaces just time spent, the hustle literally of spending time learning these activities. It's pretty hard to make it to like some of the top tier, at least in terms of earners in the online or blogging world, without spending exorbitant amount of time. So if it's something that you really want, if it's something that you really enjoy, think about like the time component required. I think that people often jump into it when they don't necessarily have the time, and that's not to say that you can't be successful. Just be realistic about how am I going to set aside time. If you say you're like working a primary job and you want to start out, be realistic. It's going to take several months, if not a year or more, in your spare time of plugging away at these activities. So, if you're working full time elsewhere, don't necessarily shoot yourself in the foot, don't get yourself down, if you're not reaching like the income level that you desire in the first 8 months. It's going to take time. I think having a realistic time frame for your expected results is part of this process. So yeah, nothing replaces the hustle for sure. You got to spend time learning and grinding, and you stay at it long enough and you're persistent for long enough, being to master these skills, and things really start to snowball. I think people often give up before that snowball effect starts to happen. So the accumulation of learning all these skills over a long enough period of time, typically people start to make it then. So stick at it for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, I would say if you imagine like a graph, like a timeline of like blogging income, there's only a very small amount, like window of time where I think you're actually getting, you're getting paid fairly for what you do. So for instance, the first year and a half of the business, Ben and I were both just working forever, like so many hours for zero return. And, it was honestly not worth our time back then. It was like not even $1 an hour. That's generous, like really, really generous by like a lot. But then you fast forward to now, and it's like, the amount of effort that Ben and I are putting in now is not vastly different from what it was before, but now we're just being vastly overpaid in a sense for that effort. So if you're willing to kind of detach yourself from the time versus like monetary reward, because it's only going to match up for like a short period of time where it's like, okay, I sat on a computer all day today, made a few $100s, like that's fair, rather than I made 3 cents today, or I made $10,000 today. Like those are weird kind of outcomes. But if you kind of just detach yourself from the results and just get to a point where sitting at the computer and like just grinding and hustling all day, no matter what the results are, when that becomes like your norm, like eventually after years of doing it, you're going to have very good outcomes, in my opinion.
Thanks for the very, very powerful tips. So this is a bit of a very personal question. So what do you both look for out of this experience running this business? What is the end game? Out of curiosity.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's a very, I think my answer changes a lot, because I think if you had asked me this question a year ago or 2 years ago, I would have said, if I can just make $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month, like I will be set. Like I will just cruise and I'll be good to go. And now that we've reached a little bit higher level of success, I realize that for me, it isn't necessarily the money or the income level that like brings me like fulfillment. It's more the act of like making progress. So, and I don't know how long that's going to go on for. I don't know if it'll go on forever, or if at some point I'll be content to kind of just coast for a while. But I think for now, the way I see this playing out is, as long as my motivation is there, I want to keep growing the business, whether that means, getting like 10% bigger from here or 10 times bigger, I don't know. And my only real goal is I want to eventually move to the beach. But outside of that, I don't have any like crazy like financial goals or anything. I'd eventually like to start another business that is not online, just to prove to myself that I can do that too. No timeline for that yet though, but I would love to have like a coffee shop or something, just to say that I did something that was not on the internet.
Right.
But
yeah, no, I think for me, like personally, you could probably sum up my motivation or my why in like a single word, and that word would be independence. I think, both independence, I guess there's kind of two angles you could take at it. When I first started, working on VTX on the side from my hospital job, I think that independence to me meant if Jeff and I were successful in growing our business, I would kind of, eventually be my own boss. I would be independent in the sense that I got to do something that I loved, and I got to be responsible for my own, actions, my own decisions, my own choices. And I think that having that flexibility was like one portion of like the independent spectrum. And then the other, that's 150%. And then the other 50% of the spectrum would be, financial independence. So you've got kind of like the lifestyle that's associated with like maybe being a more flexible business owner. And then the 50% of like the financial incentive of, I want to be financially independent when, this is said and done. I want the fruits of our labor to mean that I have enough income so that I don't have to, necessarily sweat the future of either my own well-being or my family's or whatever the case may be. I think that, there's two versions of independence. One's like kind of time independence and lifestyle independence. And then again, the financial aspect as well of I'm a registered nurse. I'm 6 figures in debt from school, and my $60,000 a year job, while that is, more than enough to put a roof over my head, it still means I'm going to be in debt for the next 15 years and kind of like a slave to paying that back. And that didn't necessarily leave a lot left over to kind of enjoy my own time. And then so again, I wanted to be lifestyle independent of that, and then independent financially from being kind of tied to that debt cycle. So those are definitely my two motivating factors. And I'm just thankful that, in about 4 years' time, Jeff and I were able to scale this to where I'm kind of seeing both of those, those 50% there. I think that I've already left my full-time job at the hospital to work on this full-time with Jeff. And then furthermore, I've been able to pay off my debt that was associated with my undergrad education. And now I'm starting to be able to like save for like bigger goals, like buying a home, and, you know, there's sort of like other tangible, you know, goals that I'd like to meet as well. So definitely independence for sure.
I will say one thing that also I know motivates both Ben and I, and has been something that has been important to us since like long before we even started VTX, is we've always wanted to, you know, build a business that could potentially create jobs for other folks. And I think that that is something that now that we've, you know, we have 2 full-time employees now, plus, you know, other contractors and whatnot. I think that we both really get a lot of fulfillment out of the fact that like something that we created now has the ability to give other people opportunities. So for me, like with Dollarsprout being somewhat of a faceless brand per se, like I don't necessarily interact with a lot of our readers. We don't have like a lot of, you know, face-to-face conversations with them. But I know that, or for me, it actually, I get a lot of my fulfillment from like the people that are on our team, like being able to interact with them and like, you know, hopefully make their lives better as a result of making our readers' lives better, which is a little less tangible for me to like kind of put my hands on and feel, just because it's so, you know, it's a little bit more distant, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, that's something that Ben and I both, you know, really value.
So you guys currently have 2 full-time employees, excluding yourselves. And how many contractors do you guys work with on the business?
Yeah, so right now there's me and Ben, and then we have 2 full-time editors, Megan and Zena. And then we have, on top of that, probably another, I guess, probably 16 to 18 contractors that are spread out between freelance writers, graphic design, social media, virtual assistants, and all that. So I would say in all, we probably are about a team of 20 folks right now. And, you know, between full-time capacity and, you know, very part-time contract capacity. So we're looking to, you know, hopefully hire a couple more full-time folks here soon to help us out in all sorts of different areas of the business. But we really like the way that we've set it up now, where we have a lot of flexibility in terms of working with contractors. It's, you know, much less risk to do something like that. You know, if income like goes up or down, like we can kind of adjust a lot of our expenses kind of as we need. Whereas with full-time employees, it's a little bit more of a commitment, which, you know, we're happy to make, but we're also much more cautious to make that type of commitment because, you know, it's a big deal to be on the hook for that. But yeah, that's where we're at now, about 20 folks in all.
Right. So how do you guys decide between, you know, contract folks as well as full-time folks? Like how do you make the decision, like, okay, I'm going to need this, I need a social media manager. Why don't I hire an in-house one or a contract or on contract? How do you guys make that decision?
So for part of the decision-making process comes down to like I guess we tie it back into our overall like business strategy, so to speak. So we look at, you know, again, we do these audits frequently, both of our business, of our marketing strategy and that kind of thing. And we say, you know, where do we want to be and who's going to help us? Who's going to, you know, who do we need to bring on to help us get there? And then, you know, what sort of level of commitment do we need? So, you know, for us, basically the way it works is one of the early, you know, acquisitions, so to speak, that we made in the scaling process was we brought on someone specifically to help us manage our money. So we brought on a virtual CFO of sorts, whose name is Ben. And his job, you know, is to not only give us professional, like financial, you know, guidance from a tax perspective. He's our accountant, but he also is a business coach, and he is like kind of like a sounding board, so to speak. Jeff and I have like our vision for how we want the business to scale, and then he's got kind of like the strict financial, you know, component of how to responsibly scale a business. And so as Jeff was alluding to, like bringing on a full-time employee will mean that we have to pay like extra payroll taxes and there's benefit considerations. And so the way we look at it is, what is the time level requirement going to be for like the position that they're gonna, like the skill that they're gonna fill, and how committed do we need them to be specifically to our brand? So what we have found is that for at least content creation, there is ample, skill on the market for, freelance writers looking to kind of pick up, extra gigs, so to speak. So we can get credentialed, expert content creators without having to necessarily commit to bringing them on full time. And often they don't want to be a full-time employee. They enjoy the flexibility of working remotely. And by choosing to work with remote employees, we expand our content pool, or our skill pool, so to speak. We have access to a skilled writer in, 3,000 miles away in Washington State, where we're in Virginia, whereas, our talent market would be much smaller if we were restricted to only hiring writers that were local. So for content creation, we like to kind of maintain the contractor status for now, just because, one, we have access to a bigger talent pool, and then two, again, we don't have the commitment of necessarily financially committing to like a W-2 employee unless that was something that they were interested in. Every once in a while, we have a contractor that's like, kind of like someone that we might consider for like an expanded role in the company. And so that's something that we keep in mind when we're working with these contractors, is that, how might they fit into like the long-term vision of our company. So we play it pretty tight to the vest. If, or close to the vest, we are considering someone for like a full-time W-2 position. It's someone that we, not only do we think his experience is going to excel in that position, but, is someone that we think brings like the skill set necessary over a long period of time and that can really add value to the company. So for content production, we tend to kind of outsource that. For editing and like overall strategy, if we're going to start sharing like intimate details about our business, we expect a higher level of commitment from that person. And that typically comes in the form of like a formal job offer, a formal W-2 employee. And the protections that come for us and the protections that come for that employee, they are well taken care of from like a benefits package perspective. I think we reimburse fairly and competitively, and they in turn, provide their experience and the value that they bring. And I like to think that they also learn a lot from us in that, capacity as well. So, if we expect a level of commitment, and an exposure to some of like our inner workings of our business, typically that's when we'll make the decision to bring that person on as an employee and not just a contractor. So, that's just, I guess, being a little bit prudent about protecting ourselves, but also fairly, reimbursing someone that's putting in a lot of effort for us. So there's no like explicit rhyme or reason, but if you're going to be heavily involved, we'd like to kind of bring you on or consider you for more of a full-time role. And Jeff might have some cool stuff to add too.
Not a lot of cool stuff, but yeah, we're not by any means like experts on this type of topic yet, since we only have, 2 full-time employees. It's not like we have like a team of 100 people. But yeah, I think biggest thing is, just knowing that a full-time hire is like a very big commitment, both from a financial perspective, personality, like company culture type of perspective. So yeah, it's easy to use contractors to kind of fill gaps while you can until you've really found the right person.
Right. So a full-time employee is working in, your workspace, living room / as well?
No, so actually, yeah, so Ben and I, we work from home full-time, and then Megan, who's our managing editor, she also lives in Blacksburg, but the way that we actually have it set up is every Tuesday and Thursday morning we meet at a coffee shop and just work together for the first half of the day. And then our other full-time editor, Zena, she actually lives in Indiana. So that's a fully remote position. So we're still adjusting to that type of setup, where we're doing like regular Slack or Zoom calls. And, I think it's, pretty easy to pull off for the most part. If you need to talk to someone, you just ring them on Slack and have a face-to-face conversation. And that's not all that much different from working in person. Obviously, I think working in person together is probably the easiest for communication, but, everyone likes to have more flexibility. So that's, important too. Because I don't want to really work somewhere where I have to go into the same place every day and see the same people every day and all that. Like I like being remote.
Right.
So, except I got to see Ben every day.
So before we end this podcast, I have a last question for you guys. If you guys could turn back time and start all over again, what would you guys do differently?
I have two answers. And neither of them were probably good answers. I would say if I was going to do this again, I would wait until the business was generating some income before I left my job to do it. Because I had no idea how stressful that would be and how much that stress impacts your work productivity. And then second thing is, if I knew how hard it was going to be, I don't know if I would have done it, to be honest. And it's saying that 4 years later, kind of now that we've quote unquote made it, is probably sounds kind of counterintuitive. But I think that if I would have known on August 1st, 2015, when I quit, that the next, 12 to 18 months were going to be as bad as they were, I don't know if I would have done it. I mean, and that's a horrible answer, but that's the truth. I think we're very lucky, very fortunate, and I feel really thankful to be in the position that I'm in. But I don't want to ever have to go through that again because it was bad.
Yeah, I think that if we rolled back the past 4 years and could start with a clean slate, I think that for us, probably the biggest piece of advice I could give is the ability to pick kind of a single focal point. I think that a lot of times as a beginner entrepreneur or whatever, beginner blogger, whatever it is you are starting, I think that there's a huge tendency to get sidetracked by shiny object syndrome. I'm sure that's a phrase a lot of us have heard before, but what you inevitably end up doing is you end up seeing where others have had found success, and you kind of start gravitating towards that path or what you think is the path, but you don't know the immense amount of work or the steps that that person went through to find the success that they found. And so when you first start, again, I recommend sticking to a single focal point, be it a single blog, and then committing to that, or a single business model or a single side hustle, and go all in on learning how to master what it is you're doing. I think that people will go from market, I say they do have a blog or an online business, they'll go from one marketing strategy to another, and then they're not finding success in any of them because they're not truly doing what it takes to master that one thing that they should be doing. So for us, the reason that we were able to start scaling is because we went all in on Pinterest. And it doesn't matter what this platform or medium is, but if you're not getting the results you want, odds are you're not putting in the time or the energy or the effort on one thing. And I think that people, when they're complaining, or not necessarily complaining, but they're disappointed that they're not getting the success that they want, it's because they didn't truly master a single skill or a single platform or whatever the case may be, and then go all in on that. So yeah, I think that resist shiny object syndrome, stick to one thing and go all in on that one thing. I think that is what truly propelled us to grow an audience and to start generating income was our commitment, our level of commitment to marketing, at least specifically for us on Pinterest. That's what worked for us. I'm not saying that that's necessarily what will work for everyone, but that worked for us. And we truly went to that next level. We spent hundreds of hours learning about the platform, the algorithm of that platform, how to get increased exposure, how to drive traffic from that platform. And that's not something that a lot of people truly spend the time to do. So yeah, all in on a single focus point and stick to it. And then, there are several platforms for driving traffic, several platforms for generating income, be it courses or, online courses, digital products, physical products, email marketing. Go all in on something and get really good at it. And that will help you scale. And then you can diversify. Then you can diversify into different income streams and different traffic acquisition models. But perfect something first, grow your business and scale your business, and then diversify your assets, diversify your traffic sources so that you're not caught in that one skill. That's another thing people do, is they find success in something and then don't diversify. Got to do both. But yeah, all in on something.
I think, that one thing is a really powerful mindset. So I'm just curious, just to expand a little bit more from Ben's answer. How did you guys know that Pinterest was the one to double down on? I'm also asking this for my own personal benefit.
Yeah, so that was more of like a last ditch effort for us, actually. When we first started our original site, BTX Capital, we were primarily focused on Twitter and Facebook for growing our audience. And we had dabbled in like a few other things like Quora and Flipboard and all those other sites. And then finally, I remember one day I saw he had Pinterest pulled up on his computer. I was like, what are you doing? Because, Ben and I had never used Pinterest in our lives, like as a consumer ever. And, Ben was like, oh, we might want to try this out. So then I tried to make a couple pins, and we tried to kind of figure out just like what the heck the platform even was, like what was, like how it even worked. And, for us, we went from getting, 5 to 10 page views a day from Facebook and Twitter to, let's say, 100 a day on Pinterest. But, that's 1,000% increase. So that's significant. And then from there, that's when we decided to like really put in a ton of focus, because, if we had gotten such good results, at that point in time from such a small time investment of learning that platform, like if we actually became competent in it, that's something that could actually give us or get us some traction. So that's sort of, for us, it was more of a last ditch type of thing. And we, saw a little glimmer of hope in it, and then went all in on it once we saw that there was some potential there.
Yeah, I think like Jeff said, it was you create opportunity for yourself simply by trying new things sometimes, and you create your own luck is the same saying that I've often heard, and at least it was true for us with Pinterest. We used it as another platform for distributing our content, and we were like, wow, we got 100 visitors today. Like, let's try to replicate that. What did we do to get that 100 visitors? And then it was like, all right, I think I have an idea of what we did, but let's learn more about the algorithm. Let's look up every resource there is on Pinterest so that I can learn how this algorithm works, so I can figure out how to further distribute our content. And that's basically what I did. I spent time, I read every article I could find for free about how Pinterest smart feed generator worked, or whatever the case may be. They didn't even have the smart feed back then. It was just more of like a chronological based algorithm. But now it's like, all right, now I kind of can wrap my head around how the smart feed works. Pinterest is not going to publicly disclose it because people would start to gain it. It's a proprietary piece of technology, so their best interest is to guard it. However, they do try to help content creators, put forth their best foot, I guess. And so there are some public, sources out there that'll kind of help guide you. So I went all in on Pinterest. I was like, all right, this is working. We're getting 100 a day. Let's get 200 a day. And then eventually we're getting 1,000 a day. And then we were getting almost 6,000 a day at one point. I think when personal finance is hot in January, we were getting almost 6,000 a day at one point from Pinterest. So 6,000 users a day at, say, it was 10 cents per website visitor. That was generating, $600 a day. And so that ended up working out to like about $20,000 in income one January. So it began, you began to be able to put a real value on the users that you were getting from that platform. And that income that we, generated, 50% went right back into the business and kind of scaling our strategies, maybe looking at paid channels. So once we found something that was working, we took a step back and said, how do we master this? How do we go all in? And it was the first time that we had gotten traction on something. And then we immediately recognized it for once and then kind of committed to learning more about it. So that's kind of what we did with Pinterest. Was we went all in on the first thing that really got us some traction, and it just happened to work out for us.
Cool, guys. Thank you so much. There's a lot of valuable insights there that I'm pretty sure that the HUSTLR podcast show would benefit from. So guys, that's the end of this episode. And if you like what you heard from this episode, remember to check out dollarsprout.com. That's DOLLARSPROUT.com, as well as breakingthe1%.com. Okay, these guys are fantastic. Definitely check them out. So if you like this episode, remember to share this with your loved ones or with your friends, and definitely subscribe to the HUSTLRs podcast. I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for coming.
This is fun.